Hello and welcome to another album analysis. In today's video we take a look at the latest album from the American rock band Story of the Year, titled Tear Me to Pieces. This is the band's sixth studio album and their follow-up to 2017's Wolves, when the band did actually make a return after about a 7-year hiatus. This album is also the first time they have worked alongside producer Colin Britton, who's worked with a variety of other bands including the likes of Papa Roach, 5 Seconds of Summer and All Time Low. So will this album hold itself together or simply fall to pieces? Let's take a look at it track by track. Opening the album, we do have the title track Tear Me to Pieces, with its soft acoustic open moving into a much heavier styling, and this felt like the greatest track on this album by a country mile. It really does encompass everything you know and love about Story of the Year. The catchy chorus just is probably the strongest on this entire album, has this really strong build at the end of the chorus as well, and we do get some other really interesting elements being brought in. The closing vocals towards the end of the track that almost emulate something that Papa Roach have done throughout the majority of their tracks, so straight away seeing that influence of Colin Britton from some of the albums and bands he's worked with. And we also do get some other interesting elements, so certainly with the lyrics, and it certainly seems to revolve around the idea of everyday anxieties in life, and that's what we're going to see throughout most of this album. A lot of meaning really built into the music, as Dan Marsala often does love to do with his songwriting, and it's easy to see why this was written as one of the first songs for this album. It hooks you from the get-go and gives you a great introduction to the album, giving you a great taste of all the things that you're going to hear as it progresses. Then we do move into Real Life, a track that has a really interesting section with this slow build pre-chorus that then drops into the chorus, and it's something the band have done on a variety of tracks. They like to play with peaks and troughs, these really low points and these really high points, and what you'll notice they do, certainly through the lyrics as well, and we've got it in this track, to the top so high we can't come down, and they gradually escalate these lyrics and then they drop into the chorus by like dropping the levels and dropping the kind of aggression in Dan Marsala's vocals, and it really adds an effect that they use quite heavily and can often be quite effective. And we do the same with the post-chorus. They have this really hard post-chorus going into the soft chorus, so they like to play around with these different things, and there's also a lot of really interesting melodic pacing that do feature on this track. It is also another track that is very melodic in its nature, has a really strong pacing to it. This is something the band have often done throughout the entirety of their careers. They love to play with songs that are really upbeat, and although they occasionally drop the pacing a little bit, on tracks like Real Life and Tear Me to Pieces, they love to keep it upbeat, really energetic, and that's something that the band do very well. Then for track 3 we do move into Afterglow, which has a very Page Avenue feel to it in the styling of the music and the actual songwriting, and it's also one of the heaviest meanings on this actual album in terms of what it means to Dan Marsala, because it's actually a song about his kids. How whenever he's going through a tough time, his kids are his afterglow. For anybody that's a parent, this song is really going to resonate with you when you just look at your kids when you're having a tough time, and that's shown really in the emotional styling on the actual track as well. The only thing I wasn't overly keen on with this track is in the chorus or at certain points in the track we get this really weird effect on the end of the word afterglow, and it really doesn't feel like it fits. It's quite jarring, and it really kind of just drops the ball a little bit, I do feel, on just really making it a very solid track, because it's once you see it once you can't stop hearing it, and it's just one of those things that is just, it doesn't feel like it belongs on the actual track, and it can be quite jarring and really just kind of takes you out of the immersiveness of this particular song. Then we do move into Dead and Gone, with its very quick fire pacing, much higher energy, and is one of the heavier tracks that does feature on this album. It really feels like it would actually fit very well on the In the Wake of Determination album. It has this really strong pacing to it, very, very quick, like most of the songs on that album were. Also makes very subtle use of electronic elements. It's something the band have really been working on since the return with Wolves. They've really been incorporating them, using them to great effect, not to the point where it's overtaking their rock sound that they are known for, but just really adding these extra little elements to many of their tracks. We also get these layered vocals really being brought in at certain times to great effect as well. So lots of little subtle things in this song that really do help to add to the overall strength. And it is a song all about cutting out toxicity of your life, whether it's somebody or something, just really getting rid of it and just kind of making your life much easier for yourself. Then we do have War coming up next, a song that has these electronic drums in the intro into these really glitchy guitars, which I really did enjoy from Ryan Phillips. It's really, really great how he put this into the track, and they actually built the song around his guitar because he came up with it and they said, we need to work with this, and that's exactly what they did. And it's another song that really plays with this idea of peaks and troughs, because what they actually do in certain areas of the track, they'll actually have the levels on these heavier elements a little bit lower. They feel a bit flat at times, but when then they get to the bridge, they amplify it by 10. They really raise the levels. So on some of these heavier elements early in the track, it does feel like it just doesn't, it feels like it needs a bit more aggression. It feels it needs a bit more oomph. But when you get to the bridge, you then see why they've used that particular styling, because it just kind of blows the roof off when they do get to that point of the track. So it has some really strong guitars really built into it, and this, like I say, this great bridge that really just raises the roof towards the end stages of this song. Then at the midpoint of the album, we do have Can't Save You, a track all about how you can't help somebody who doesn't want to help themselves. And I'm sure many people will resonate with this track or know somebody in their life they want to help, but at some point you've just got to say, enough is enough, I cannot do this anymore. Features more great guitar work from Ryan, and it also sees this constant shifting between clean and heavier vocals, something that is almost the icon of Dan Marsala's vocals. He's done it throughout every single album this band have produced, really showing his proficiency for dancing between these two styles and sounds, because it's not always easy to go from clean vocals into heavier, darker vocals. It can be such a strain to do it multiple times within a track, but he does this throughout this track almost constantly, and it's great to see he's still got the ability to do that after all these years. Next up, we do take a trip back in time to 2005, a track that is definitely an ode to the past, and that is shown through many of the lyrics as well. I'll spill my heart for you. From growing up on Page, there's just multiple little bits and pieces dotted into the track that really tie back to their previous works, to their previous albums, or make reference to lyrics from those songs. And it is very much a reminiscent track for the band, really about the journey that they have taken themselves through, even though they actually released Page Avenue in 2003, but I don't think would have the same catch to it if that was the title of the actual track itself. Although it is slightly contradictory in the lyrics at times, this idea of we won't change, but those days are gone and behind us. They do mix the lyrics up a little bit, which can be a little bit jarring, confusing at times, but a very simple track that's just really for anyone that wants a bit of nostalgia, a bit of memory, a bit of a trip down memory lane. It serves as the perfect song to provide you with that. Then we do have Sorry About Me at track number 8, an acoustic track that does scale eventually into the full band, and again another song that sounds like it belongs on Page Avenue, or certainly has that era of Story of the Year really built in and incorporated into the track, and it is one of their stronger, softer tracks. They are a band that are able to dance between stylings from these heavier, aggressive tracks into something much more acoustic or something much softer, and they do it really well. They play at both styles really well, and this song does show that with the band. And it's a song all about not being good enough, and it's done through that personalized almost idea with Dan using a lot of first person, sorry about me, so it's really shown through the title as well as the lyrics. Then at track 9 we do have Take the Ride, which is probably the poppiest sounding song on this album. Very upbeat, makes great use of acoustic guitar as the band have done throughout most of this album. Not using it all the time, but usually when it is used it does add a great effect. However, at times this track does feel slightly bland. However, there is probably a reason for that. It's one of the first ever songs they've used where the chord progression never changes, which is quite an interesting take for the band, because when you've got guitarists that are so capable, certainly with Ryan Phillips, it's weird that they finally kind of tried this idea, and because it does sound slightly different because of these lack of chord progressions, at times does just make it feel a little bit bland. And it's a song all about being reckless and entering the unknown, which the band actually did by trying something they've never ever done before, so kudos for them for trying it, but unfortunately it is quite noticeable and just does make the track feel a bit blander, even though it is quite poppy. Then at track 10 we do have Knives Out, and I felt this was probably the second second strongest track on this album. It really did hook me in, and just really I wanted to hear it over and over again. Has this great drum build opening from Josh Wills, and his drumming is pretty much just consistent throughout this album. He's always been a drummer that is very consistent with his work. It never really feels like he's ever dropping off. He's always very stable, occasionally mixing things up, and this track feels like the one where he really gets the most work out of that drum kit. Has a much faster vocal delivery as well. It almost feels like at times like Dan's trying to break into rapping, and a very melodic chorus with a very strong hook. It is probably one of these first or second strongest chorus on this album. It is definitely a fight between that and Tear Me to Pieces, and it also has these great pre-chorus elements, some really great pacing from Josh, and a chugging instrumental that is thrown. It's not something we often get to see. We've probably seen it a bit more on earlier albums, but I wish they had played with it slightly more in this album. As I said before, you've got some really strong instrumentalists. Let them do some work on their own, but unfortunately it's not really incorporated until we do hit this track. Then rounding out the album, we do have Use Me, an acoustic track that has this very slow build. It's layers in lots of different elements, but I felt this was a very flaccid ending to the album, unfortunately. I mean, for a band that are very strong at writing acoustic tracks, this doesn't feel like it lives up to the same level, or certainly serves as the perfect ending for the album. And I have no issue with the band using softer acoustic tracks for the end of an album, but this song just feels flat on so many levels. I mean, you look at some of the work they've done, or outro tracks they've included on previous albums. It's certainly for Wolves, Praying for Rain was fantastic. It was 7 minutes, it was quite long, but it just felt like a perfect ending to the album. This song feels like it just falls flat on its face. It doesn't feel like it adds really anything. It kind of leaves you ending the album going, oh, that's the last track. I kind of wish they'd swapped around, maybe put Use Me as one of the middle tracks on the album, maybe just to break it up a little bit, or add some more elements to it. It's more just the acoustic guitar and Dan singing, which would work great on an acoustic, maybe a bonus track if they were to release a deluxe edition, but unfortunately it really just kind of kills all the pace that we have seen throughout the course of the album. So overall, there's certainly some really great elements featured in this album. It does feel like at times it's a bit of a nostalgia trip, a bit of a walk down memory lane. They've brought in lots of different pieces from different albums over there to new. I mean, you can see elements from In the Wake of Determination, some elements that feel like they're drawn from Page Avenue, and occasionally from The Black Swan as well. And I really do like that they're kind of looking back at their career and going, okay, what worked for us, what didn't work, what elements do we really remember? And aside from the incorporation of the electronic elements, I don't feel like we're seeing too much change from the band from their earlier sounds. They do have a lot of iconic things that really do make them Story of the Year. Dan Marsala's vocals, very iconic, and a lot of the band members, because they've been with the band for such a long time, you're used to hearing the stylings and soundings of their music, and it doesn't really feel like they reach too far out of their usual sound with this album. So overall, I'm going to give this album a 7 out of 10. It has some really great elements. Some of the tracks are very catchy. They've kind of incorporated lots of different things, but it has just that typical Story of the Year sound. But I don't think this album is as expansive and as strong as it possibly could have been. It does have some very bland tracks or some very bland moments, and certainly if you were to compare it to albums such as Wolves, doesn't feel like it has that same power and that same energy. It just feels like it's a bit of a walk down memory lane. I mean, Wolves was produced by Aaron Sprinkle, who's very strong at getting some of the best out of bands and really building these stories, building these strong structures around albums, and that's what he certainly did with the previous album. But this just unfortunately doesn't seem to live up to that same power. It has some great elements that I really did enjoy, but it didn't grab me in the same way that Wolves did or some of their previous albums. So that would be everything for today's video, but please feel free to let me know your thoughts about this album in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite track is, what you feel the weakest or strongest tracks were on the album. Certainly Knives Out and Tear Me to Pieces are probably the two that really did grab me the most. I think there were two fantastic tracks that did feature on this album, and easy to see why Tear Me to Pieces was the title of the album, and obviously the title track because of its just inert catchiness and the strength of the song overall. But I would love to know your thoughts, and if you want to see more content like this, then please do feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next album analysis.